Welcome to another story made by Oracle One. The town of Raven Hollow had always been shrouded in an atmosphere of eerie tranquility. Nestled between dense pines and rolling hills, it was a community where everyone knew one another, where secrets were whispered in hushed tones, and where the nights were thick with a silence broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustling of dead leaves. It was the kind of place that seemed stuck out of time, preserved in a perpetual state of uneasy peace. No one could have imagined what the dawn of the new autumn would bring. It began one chilly October evening. The sky was overcast, thick clouds blotting the moon and stars, and the wind had begun to carry the crisp scent of decay and damp earth. People in town noticed the air growing unusually heavy and red. At first, it was just a faint tint rolling in over the treetops like the whisper of a coming storm cloud, but soon it consolidated into a dense, pulsating mist that blanketed Raven Hollow, swallowing the streets, the houses, the very bones of the town beneath a sinister scarlet fog. No one knew where it came from. The locals whispered theories: an eerie natural phenomenon, a chemical spill from a forgotten mine, a punishment cast by some ancient curse. But no matter the origin, the effect was undeniable and horrifying. Clara Hastings was the first to realize something was terribly wrong. She was the owner of the only bookstore in town, a small, cluttered place filled with dusty shelves and the musty smell of aged paper. On the evening the red fog rolled in, Clara had stayed late organizing new stock and preparing for the upcoming harvest festival. As the mist crept under her door and seeped through the broken window panes, Clara felt her breath hitched. She coughed hard once, then again, and something inside her shifted. Her eyes glazed over briefly before she began speaking, but not with her own voice. The words came out in a harsh, guttural tone that wasn't hers, yet she spoke perfectly fluent English. She began reciting something, a chant filled with ancient phrases nobody had heard in Raven Hollow before. Her assistant, Jamie, found her in the early hours, standing motionless in the back of the shop, eyes empty and voice not her own. Panic rose swiftly in Jamie's chest. The scream she tried to issue caught in her throat. She grabbed Clara's arm, shaking her, begging her to snap out of it, but only that strange, alien voice came forth. Soon, Clara's body convulsed slightly, and the fog curling through the cracks of the door thickened, as if feeding on her. Word spread fast. Clara wasn't the only one. Across the town, people with droopy eyes and pale faces breathed in the red fog, and the transformation began to manifest in them. Their speech turned unnatural, chilling in its cadence and pitch, as if influenced by something inside them but utterly detached from their own psyche. They would start speaking words that made no sense, or worse, they spoke in voices that were older, crueler, voices that spoke of death, of hunger, of forgotten gods and blood debts. The residents called it the Red Fog's curse, but no one had any power to fight it. Aaron Drayton, the town's sheriff, tried to keep order as incidents escalated. He barricaded the town's perimeter and urged the residents to avoid breathing the mist. Masks were distributed, windows shuttered tight. But the fog was insidious. It seeped through cracks, creeped in beneath doors and windows with uncanny persistence, and haunting laughter soon echoed through the streets, carried on the mist itself. Within days, the town became a ghostly vestige of its former self. Shadows moved where no one stood, whispers echoed where none dared to listen, and those under the influence of the mist seemed lost to madness, puppets to some unseen puppeteer lurking in the red haze. Families trembled behind locked doors, praying and clutching one another for warmth and safety. The air was thick with dread. One chilling morning, Aaron's deputy, Lisa Carver, came rushing into the station, her eyes wide with terror. "Sheriff, you need to hear this," she gasped, voice trembling. "The church, Father McAllister, he's speaking in that voice too. And it's not just random words, it's a prophecy. He says the mist is a harbinger of something ancient, something hungry. Aaron nodded grimly and instructed his small team to gather as much information as possible. They approached Father McAllister cautiously. In the dim light of the decrepit church, the priest stood at the pulpit, eyes glowing faintly with a spectral light. His voice that day was deeper, an unnatural resonance vibrating through the wooden pews. The fog, he intoned, is a veil between worlds, a barrier weakened. We have disturbed the balance, and they come, the lords of the crimson deep, hungering to reclaim what was lost. They speak through your lungs, your souls, whispering promises and pounding fear into flesh. Aaron's heart pounded, but before he could call for help, his radio crackled with distress. "Sheriff." Jamie's voice trembled. "There's something outside your house. Something, not human." Aaron grabbed his rifle and ran through the thickening mist. At his porch stood a thin, emaciated figure. The skin was translucent where it stretched tight, veins pulsing with red-tinged darkness. Its eyes were featureless slits of crimson light, and it spoke, not with words, but a series of reverberating clicks and guttural sounds that vibrated in Aaron's skull. He raised his rifle and fired. The creature vanished into the fog with a shriek that pierced the still air. Later that night, the sheriff gathered the remaining uninfected townsfolk in the community center. Everyone was afraid, their faces pale and eyes hollow. The red fog seeped through the windows despite the sealed doors, and the oppressive stillness pressed down on their morale. "If anyone breathes it in, you won't be yourselves anymore," Aaron warned. "This thing changes who we are and takes over our bodies like a parasite. We're facing something ancient here. We need to find a way to survive until the mist clears." Maggie, the local librarian and a keen researcher, stepped forward clutching a book bound in cracked leather. "I found something in the archives," she said breathlessly. "Old journals from when Raven Hollow was first settled. Talks about a red cloud that came once, long ago, and a terrible price paid by the townsfolk. There's mention of a hidden cavern in the woods beneath the old fire tower. Maybe this is where it all started." Aaron nodded toward the nearest exit. "Then that's where we need to go. If there's a way to break this, it's there." The group accepted the grim mission, all too aware of the fog lurking outside, waiting to claim more victims. Armed with whatever weapons they could muster, flashlights, axes, makeshift spears, they stepped into the hellish scarlet embrace of the night. The fog was nearly blinding, thick like blood in the air, casting haunting shadows and turning every sound into a distorted echo. Each breath was a gamble. They wrapped cloths around their faces, but the fog had a way of sneaking past even the tightest covers. As they trudged through the twisted forest, eerie moaning and voices not their own filled the red mist. The trees themselves seemed to pulse as if alive, each step taken under whispered warnings from unseen entities. One by one those closest to the fog's edge turned pale and began reciting in strange tongues, their eyes rolling back as they were consumed by voices not their own. Aaron had to push some to keep moving, dragging one young man who lapsed into delirium back to the path. Hours passed before the group reached the fire tower, now a crumbling ruin swallowed by vines and rust. Maggie led them to a trapdoor hidden beneath a tangle of roots. The cavern beneath was dark and suffocating, smelling of ancient earth and stale rot. As they descended, the red mist seemed to dissolve, replaced by the brittle silence of forgotten time. In the cavern's depths, they found symbols etched into the walls, circles surrounded by runes bathed in the dim glow of Maggie's flashlight. It was a ritual site, ancient beyond measure, and at the center stood a stone pedestal cracked and worn by centuries. "These markings," Maggie whispered, "talk about binding the fog, imprisoning the spirits it carries." It was a seal, The original settlers must have trapped whatever this red mist is down here. Aaron approached the pedestal and saw a rusty iron box, bound tight with chains. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and from the cavern walls came scratching noises and low growls that echoed through the chambers. Something was stirring. Before the group could react, a hideous shape emerged from the shadows, a creature born of nightmares. It was tall and gaunt, its skin the color of dried blood, eyes blazing like molten stars, and long, clawed hands dripping with dark ichor. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide in a primal grin. It was the source of the voices, the ancient entity bound in the cavern, whose whispers had ridden the mist to claim new hosts, forced to feed on their souls to survive. Aaron raised his weapon, but the creature's speed was unnatural. It lunged with terrible force, but the group managed to trap it between themselves and the pedestal. Maggie, remembering the dusty journals, shouted, "We need to rebind it." The seal, use the chants. The survivors formed a shaky circle, each whispering the old ritual, lighting candles found in the cavern. The creature screamed, a sound that twisted the air and made their ears bleed, but the chanting grew louder, cutting through its rage. The red fog outside seemed to pulse in response as the creature writhed, becoming translucent and diminishing. The box snapped shut, sealing the entity back into imprisonment with a binding spell. The fog began to thin as the first sliver of dawn pierced the cavern's entrance. The voices faded, the town's own voices returning with them. People began to come back from the fog's influence, coughing out the last remnants of the curse. Clara's eyes cleared, her own voice returning as she collapsed into Jamie's arms. Raven Hollow was scarred but alive. Yet even as the sun rose on this new day, the survivors knew the red mist was not truly gone. It had been delayed, imprisoned, yes, but waiting, always waiting in the shadows beyond the veil, hungry for the day it could rise again. For more stories, like and subscribe.